Today, we're going to be talking about and peeling back the curtain on hands off growth and showing you how you can let the pros do the work for you so that you can focus on, I don't know, well, everything else. So let's make retirement planning easy and exciting. Steve and I are ready to get this going. Another episode of Power Your Retirement. And today's is going to be a really good one if you are someone who appreciates a hands off approach to finances, specifically if we're talking about investing here, because we're going to talk about managed portfolios and whether you should consider that option. What really is a managed portfolio? How does it work? Why is it something worth considering? We're going to talk about some of the benefits and things to know about this and whether it's something that's going to be a good fit for you. So, Steve, I'm looking forward to jumping into this with you today. And let's start right there. What in the world is a managed portfolio? Can you explain that to us, first of all, and give us an idea for those who don't know?
A managed portfolio is a lot of it is how it sounds. Somebody's managing a portfolio for you. So that is the basis of it rather than you do it yourself.
Okay.
Whether that's, there's several levels to that. So if they pick off the list of 8 options or 20 options and they pick a mix, so to speak, there's still that portfolio has even if it's just an index fund, it has, if it's S&P, it's got 502 companies in it, right? And balance that around. Some of it's equal weight and some of it's, weighted. It just depends. So they all, that would be a managed fund. But when we talk about managed portfolios, we're really building off of the last episode of picking the right investments, right? So the managed portfolio is managed custom to what you need, the type of risk you should take, the type of return you need to achieve your goals. That is really what I want people to think of, because a lot of people just default to a mutual fund being a managed portfolio, and they wouldn't be wrong. But if it's not managing to your goals, then it's no value to you. So we want that customization.
If someone's heard these terms, I want to make sure we cover this as part of this conversation. Active management versus passive management those are not created equal, right? What are the different differences there?
So active management is really a manager handpicking different stocks, bonds that they think are going to perform well. So intelligently looking at things, diversifying, all of that, making sure that we're picking things that are going to grow fast if it's in a growth fund. And as people get a little bit older, they want more stability. So looking at companies that are really stable. So we want to make sure that we're handling that part. But if you look on the other side, is really handling nothing, because then all you're doing is choosing an index. You pick the index that you want to own. S&P 500 is popular. Mid cap, Russell 2000, Dow Jones. There's international indexes. There's European. There's Asian, there's all kinds of indexes out there. And what they do is they don't think, they just own the market that index represents. And it may be 500, Wilshire 5000 is owning the whole market, right? So, it depends on what you're picking, but it never really thinks. You're not getting rid of the stinkers and keeping the good ones and what you think is going to grow. So there's nothing intelligent about it other than you get a market type return.
So when someone picks a target date fund in their portfolio, they're selecting a very passive type of portfolio management?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So they're picking basically, they're taking whatever that index represents, that type of investment. Usually they group it into a certain type, right? So like S&P would be largest 500 companies in America. So they would group it into that. And then you look at the history of it and you kind of get an average return. But what people don't realize is that when you have an index, especially as we get a little bit older, the employees start to get into that 5th decade. Sometimes this even happens emotionally in the 4th decade, 40s, that the market is going to drop with the market. Like in 2020, This is just citing COVID. S&P went down, over 30% in a very short period of time. So if you were in an index, you're just going to fall daily with it. There's nothing intelligent that can be done to try to soften that up. There's also nothing that can be done on the upswing of that in 2020 when it came back in the same year. You're just going to ride that whole market wave, and there's no way to really smooth out the ride or make it a little choppier, depending on what's appropriate for that particular client.
Yeah. Sounds like, we often in this world boil things down to black and white, really, and there's never anything that actually is black and white, or not many of those things. And it sounds like this active versus passive portfolio management and this finding the right fit and all of these things similarly fall on more of a spectrum. And so by deciding to work with a team like Powerhouse Financial Advisors, someone is saying, hey, I'm going to move from this very far end of the spectrum of passive management, and I'm going to move up that scale to have a little bit more intelligence, a little bit more selective picking, a little bit more active management going into my portfolio and in my decision making. We're making a conscious choice when we engage with a professional like you to help move us to a different part of that spectrum.
Yes, there's a lot of different approaches, and just like when you're doing retirement planning, everybody's situation is a little bit different. Some are really on a buy and hold trajectory. Others are wanting to smooth out the ride, which would pretty much require active management. Others still are wanting to take some risk, but want to have maybe some unique strategies, generically speaking, just to kind of give the sentiment. If the valuation of the market is high, maybe some sort of methodology into stop loss or something like that. That's just a market term, but a portfolio that would have some different features inside of it. But when you do the index, that's all you get is whatever the market gives you, you're going to have to absorb. And in major down years, like 2022, where bonds dropped almost as bad as stocks did, there was nowhere to go. And if you were in the index, you just had to take the pain.
So if we smooth out the ride, I think was the terminology you used a few moments ago, in a case like 2020, is that going to make a financial difference for someone, or are we just making it more emotionally palpable to get through those time periods? Like if I ride the wave all the way back down and then ride it all the way back up with that fully passive style versus stopping the loss and then, changing strategies, however appropriate, through that ups and downs. Again, I asked a similar question on the prior episode, but in a different context. So, same question here: is that making a financial difference by smoothing out that ride versus just a more comfortable, time period?
I'll just tell you about Bill.
Okay.
So because
Go to the example when needed. I think that's very helpful. I can tell I was dancing you into a territory of very difficult to answer this for everybody. So give us Bill's example.
I'm going to just give you an example here because I think it's an emotional response is really what I'm saying. Because if the long-term return is say 10% on that S&P index equivalent, and the long-term return of something active is 10%, what can happen is if we have a portfolio that's really designed around strength, and when things go bad, resilient, the diversification in that particular fund is done thoughtfully with historical metrics. When the market's down 20, a fund like that, and this is all hypothetical. So Bill came in and said, hey, I really don't want to go down 20, but I like to make 10. Well, I said, we still have to take risk, and we can't guarantee any of that. This is not some kind of an annuity or something. So what we can do is with a thoughtful portfolio, what happened was that particular portfolio would drop maybe half to 3/4 of the way down. But then when the market would rebound, it'd maybe go, that measure up, right? So it didn't go down as much. You didn't have to recover. But when it's up, it didn't have to go as high to get those average returns. But what matters? You'd be like, so why go through all the work? Somebody might say. But for Bill, it mattered huge because he gets a little nervous when things go down, because he's in his last decade, just getting into it before he's looking to retire. So in that particular fund, of all of his funds, that going down less emotionally was much more palatable for him. Even though the result in the end is very similar, you might say whatever, but he still has to try to sleep at night. He still has to go home and try to explain this to his spouse about what's going on in his employer's 401k. And if we're more thoughtful about it, it just gives a better experience to the client by being more thoughtful than just jamming it all in there in an index fund. That's one way that we can really provide some value. There's a lot of others. There's ways to make more money. There's ways to make less money intentionally because you really want that ride smoothed out. You want it even more so than what I just said. So there's a lot of different examples, but with active management, we can really be thoughtful about how the client reacts to down markets. Because one thing that I do know is that it hurts 3 times as much to lose $1 than the euphoria of making $1. And we got to be very sensitive to that because we need to achieve the goals. But if you panic out, you're like, I'm going to save a little bit on fees and go with an index fund, and you're down 20 or 40 some if it's a 2008 experience, and you panic out the bottom, those are the people that don't recover. So saving that little bit of fee because it was such a roller coaster that they decided to, come out and raise a white flag and surrender, they won't financially recover from that.
You make a great point that we were making the assumption originally, or I was making the assumption originally, that someone's going to stick with it all the way through that downside and back up the other side. And what you've seen over the years so much is that without that person in their ear steering them in the right direction, helping them stay the course, or by putting some of these other active management things in place that prevent the panic, prevent the
Right.
big drop that leads to the panic, what happens way too many times is people ride the drop, then get off the ride and miss the ride back up. And that's what's hurting them extremely in their financial futures. And so one of the benefits of this more active style is eliminating that as even a possibility because you're not letting it happen in the first place. So that makes a lot of sense. And I appreciate that.
It does. And people, depending on the person, this isn't everyone, but a good portion of clients really don't understand a lot of the finance. And that's where we can provide some value in conversation. But emotionally, let me tell you this is actual statistic. This is real. 32% of people would rather go to the DMV and wait a half a day for their appointment than try to pick the mutual funds out of their employer 401k list. It's crazy.
That's really saying something, isn't it?
That's a real survey. 32% would rather sit for a half a day at the DMV than pick options off of their 401k list.
I'm not one of that 32%, but I believe it and I respect it and understand the aversion for sure. So let's talk then a little bit about fit to wrap up today's episode, Steve. Certainly, target date funds and the default options, they exist for a reason. Who are they a fit for? And then who are they not a fit for? So if I'm watching today's video on YouTube or listening on an audio podcasting app, and I'm like, all right, so where do I fall in this spectrum? Am I a good fit for this passive management? And I don't need to get into all of this other stuff. Who's a good fit for that? And then who's a good fit for adding in this layer of active management and engaging with a financial professional like you?
I would say one of the first filters that I try to figure out if I'm sitting down with someone is, do they want to do it themselves? Are they looking for some education? I can point them in a direction and get education. We give education on site at these employers all the time. So if you're a do-it-yourselfer, then maybe doing index funds or doing it, picking off the list, but you're going to have the time and the inclination to do it.
Okay.
So you have to put time in. And if you're thinking, I don't really want to sit there and figure out all the time, you don't just set it and forget it. That doesn't work. So if you pick when you're starting with a company, you have to monitor and understand these things. And if people want to put in the time and have the inclination to do that, then I think that's a fit for somebody just picking default options and working off of that. But you have to realize, and we said this in a previous episode, nobody is objective about their own money. So you'll need somebody in your life to help you make sure that you're not emotionally making these decisions. So even if you are a DIYer, I really don't think it's a good idea unless you have somebody. And that's just assuming you do the work and figure it out. But make sure that when that precipitous drop comes and that fear comes up that we were talking about before, that emotional reaction, that big drop, that you got somebody there to keep you on the straight and narrow and not panic out.
Managed portfolios gives you still the ability to be pretty hands-off with your finances, but with all the benefits of having somebody watching what's happening in your accounts consistently and making sure that you're on the right track, not just with what's happening in your 401k, but your entire financial picture as a whole. And if you would like to go through and learn a little bit more about the planning process, about this management style, managed portfolios, explore some more of those benefits, how it fits to your particular situation, invite you to go to powerupyour401k.com. There, we're going to have a toolkit that you can order for free, and it's going to be delivered to you with great information, packed with good information, including Steve's book, Power Up Your 401k. It's going to have other great resources and details and reports in there, a couple of other goodies for you as well. You can get the toolkit for free. It's a great starting point for anybody wanting to dip their toe into the waters of retirement planning or wanting to learn a little bit more about your finances and how you can best prepare for your future. In particularly, this toolkit is great for anyone who's an employee of a publicly traded utility, as a lot of the examples and the design and the concepts here and some of the things that you'll have access to are specifically designed for your industry. That's who Steve's working with each and every day. Again, go to powerupyour401k.com. That's where the toolkit is, as well as other helpful resources. Steve, thanks for the great breakdown today on managed portfolios. I know we'll have the idea of keeping your retirement plan flexible on the agenda for our next episode, and we'll dive into that conversation next time around with you. But until then, take care, and thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Walt. Appreciate the listeners out there.
Yeah, we'll talk to you soon and see everybody soon as well. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast if you're watching on YouTube and consuming it there. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode. You can also follow us on your favorite audio podcasting app, specifically Apple and Spotify if you're listening to us there. Follow the show so you get new episode alerts also. For Steve, I'm Walter. We'll see you next time right back here on Power Your Retirement. This podcast is provided by Powerhouse Financial Advisors, an independent firm with advisory services offered through Parsonex Advisory Services, Inc., PAS, a federally registered investment advisor. The information provided is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered as personalized investment advice. PAS does not guarantee the accuracy, completeness, or suitability of this information for your specific circumstances. Investment decisions should be based on an individual's goals, time horizon, and risk tolerance. Past performance is not indicative of future results, and all investments carry a degree of risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any case studies, testimonials, or endorsements shared in this podcast are illustrative of individual experiences and may not be representative of the experience of all clients. They do not guarantee future performance or success. You should not infer any level of assurance regarding future financial outcomes. Listeners should consult with a qualified financial, tax, or legal professional before making any investment decisions. Parsonex Advisory Services, Inc. does not provide tax or legal advice. Be sure to consult with your tax and legal professionals regarding your specific circumstances. For a copy of our Form ADV Part 2A, which provides additional information about PAS, including our advisory fees and services, please visit powerhousefinancialadvisors.com.